What's up, everybody? Today we're talking about the trailer that just came out for Unreal 5 and the release window that Offworld has announced, along with discussing playtest number 4 that is happening this weekend. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, leave a like, drop a comment down below with your thoughts. Also, if you want to get 30% off of Squad, or if you want to gift it to a friend, you can now use my code SLAY3K30 using the link in the description below the video. Now, if you haven't already seen the trailer that Offworld's posted, I will link that down below so you can see it in its full glory, but I'll also reference it some in the video. Now, probably the most important thing that you'll glean from the trailer itself is a release window that Offworld has provided, being summer 2025. And if you've been keeping up with your calendar, that's pretty soon. So what do I think about the release window generally? Well, first of all, it's not that surprising to me. It's been almost a year since we had our last significant content drop with the WPMCs that happened all the way back in September 2024. So I think reasonably we need an update. Now, I don't necessarily promote the idea that devs should hurry up because content's lacking, especially with an update of this magnitude. But I do think there is going to be pressure on Offworld to deliver this update in a reasonable amount of time, and clearly they're looking to get it out sooner than later. Now, the thing we don't know is if they mean summer as in June, if they mean summer as in July, or all the way to September. Now, my initial hope is that we have a few more playtests before release, which we now know that we will at least have one more playtest, being playtest number 4, but we'll get to that in a moment. But part of the reason summer 2025 doesn't really surprise me is because it is going to be a continued work in progress. We're looking at a update to the game that is maybe the first step, the first large step into getting the game into sort of a new era, because there are things that they've talked about and discussed with the audience that aren't going to be in 9.0 but are expected to come later. We've talked about this a little bit already, but night to day cycles, weather, also cast helicopters and AA aren't going to be included with 9.0, but that could be down the road. So I think it's important not to look at 9.0 as just, hey, this is the end all of whatever Squad is going to be moving forward. This is just a step in that direction. I think Norby sort of hinted at this and discussed it a little bit in our dev interview, that we are kind of moving forward into this new engine, and there's going to be things that come after that that are opened up by getting 9.0 sort of out of the way. I do realize that Offworld has been spending a lot of time working on this transition, trying to get it up to speed and prepared for release, especially when it comes to things like performance across a variety of different system specs based on what the community has, while also trying to transfer vehicles and maps into what they need to be for Unreal 5. And I think there's also this thing that the longer the playtests go on, the less likely you're going to have a ton of full servers. People are going to start to lose interest in playtesting and just be waiting in the wings for the eventual update to drop. So I think 9.0 may be somewhat of a work in progress, or at least the first large step in the direction they want to go in, but simultaneously it allows for even greater feedback and information to be processed by the team to help continue to fix bugs, tweaks, and polish 9.0 or Unreal 5 into what it needs to be moving forward before adding content. But I'm not a game dev, and I'm just looking at this from my perspective as to, hey, this is not a shocking release window. This is maybe some things that are on their mind or some things that they realize. Because in my opinion, I still have some concerns, especially when it comes to infantry play and picture-in-picture scopes, because that's been one of the bigger drop-offs in terms of performance. Which brings me to my next topic, being the current playtest that's happening this weekend. Playtest number 4. And there's a couple of notes attached to the announcement for the playtest that I wanted to highlight because I think it's interesting. And the one that really caught my attention is conversations around picture-in-picture scopes. And it appears that they have implemented what they call an introductory option for replacing the picture-in-picture scopes. It appears that this is for players with lower-end computers or anyone that feels significant drop in FPS when using a picture-in-picture scope. And this will apparently be a setting that you can switch on or off in the settings. So I quickly took a look at this, and right now you can see like a 20 to 30 frame drop in FPS with picture-in-picture scopes. And this is at like 1440 and pretty much medium settings across the board. Now, if I go to the menu and I change to the performance mode, it's going to be a little bit jarring, because essentially what it looks like is happening is they've blacked out the outside of the scope. So really all you're looking through is the scope itself. Now, from an FPS standpoint, of course, you're going to have improved performance because it's not rendering in everything that we normally see with picture-in-picture scopes. I'm not entirely sure how this works or how we would perceive a difference in performance, because obviously performance is better, but we're removing so much out of the frame. So I hope to do a follow-up to this where I can get a little bit more information from Offworld about how this operates and how the testing will potentially lead to improvements in performance in the playtest or eventually in 9.0. I am pleased to see that Offworld's working on this. I just need to understand a little bit more about the technical side of how this operates in this test. I'm really curious to know how many folks are going to be flipping that switch just to get the performance boost, despite the fact that you can't see around the scope itself. I do also think this calls into question the fact that some of the scopes feel really, really narrow, and we'd like to have a little bit more sort of range of view within the scope itself. And I think the black frame really highlights that, and that'll be called into question. Now, the next thing applies to vehicles and performance and servers. So this is a server performance optimization that addresses vehicles, specifically allowing for multi-thread vehicle animations, reducing the impact that vehicles have on server-side performance. Now, another reminder that I'm not a game dev, but this sounds kind of interesting. Obviously, vehicles have some sort of impact on performance for the server. So for Playtest 4, this is something that they're testing. This is not probably a final implementation by any means, nor is it necessarily something we would see in the 9.0 release, but it does seem like something that could be an interesting thing to see how it affects performance. Does this address things like desync for vehicles, or how does this affect overall gameplay for everybody in the server when there is a round with a ton of different vehicles operating? Because I imagine that can take a server hit, and then you start to add in some of the new physics added for vehicles and some of the visual fidelity and the things that are already going to affect performance with Unreal 5. I think anything that they can do to improve it is obviously ideal. And I think it's kind of cool that Offworld is taking an opportunity to test something else in playtesting that I didn't otherwise know could actually happen or was something they could implement at this point. But I do think this is another example of Offworld taking an opportunity to sort of continue to develop Squad in Unreal 5 and where it could go post-launch. The next thing that they're looking to address in this playtest is what they're calling the 1 FPS issue. They've inserted some things to help try to track this problem to figure out where it's caused. But if you do run into this, it's probably ideal that you give some form of feedback. I'll link the playtesting Discord down below, but that's usually where you can find an opportunity to provide your feedback if there is something that you feel like you need to make the devs aware of. So to recap, we have a summer 2025 release window for the 9.0 update, which is going to introduce Unreal 5 to the live version of Squad. And we also know that Offworld is continuing to test and polish this, especially with the playtest number 4 that they've announced, and that will be live this weekend for you to play. Now I realize there's going to be a lot of concern over the release window being this summer. Offworld is obviously trying to put a lot of effort into getting this ready, or as ready as they can for the release, but I think it's important to keep in mind that even though it's a 9.0 release and it's a major update to the game, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be complete in all its glory. Something Norby mentioned in the dev interview I did for Unreal 5 was he discussed how when you're working on a new engine, the time to release it is really when that new engine starts to pass up the old engine. As in the experience becomes better in what they're developing versus the engine that is going to be sort of phased out. And while I still think there's performance improvements to be made, especially with the picture-in-picture scopes and some other areas, of course, I do think it is starting to get to a point where it's almost harder to play Unreal 4 engine Squad because you're missing some of the things that now we're sort of excited about with Unreal 5. As in, you're missing some of the vehicle improvements from a physics standpoint, some of the visual fidelity and the lighting. It sort of grows on you as you play it. But I think one of the big things that I'm really excited about is just the detail and the effort put into the new Al Basra. If this is something that can be added to other maps in terms of the props and assets, I think there's a real opportunity for Squad to really take off in terms of just their map design. Because something else I see with Al Basra is not just the detail and stuff, but it's also that there seems to be a variety of biomes almost included in the same map. There's a ton of POIs that could be options for more layers. And I think that is something huge in terms of replayability for Squad that could really give it a lot more latitude with players. That replayability and having just lanes that feel different from another lane on the same map. For example, if we're playing the west side of the map, it feels different than the east side of the map on the new Al Basra. Same with the north and the south. But a lot of that has to come with the continued updates after Unreal 5. And to Norby's point, this is just the beginning of a new journey for Squad. So I'm excited to see where this goes, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Along with your thoughts on Playtest 4 if you are diving into it this weekend. And of course, hit the subscribe button and leave a like. And I'll catch you all next time.